So in summary, can you succinctly tell us what we can take away from this report? And also, if you can provide more details about the neck. Yeah. I heard a lot of people behind me gasping when that detail was mentioned.
Yeah, let me try to be very comprehensive. As Dr. Roger Mitchell said, that the focal area of red discoloration in the soft tissue of the back of the head, the occipital region, is significant because he cannot determine why you have that red discoloration in the back of his brain. That's significant. He also talked about, Mr. Williams, just the fact that as it's common practice, he was missing his throat when they received the body. And he wants to know why they held it back. He's not drawing any conclusions, but he said he would want to examine it if there were neck fractures or compressions to the neck. And he thinks that's significant to know at autopsy. The reason he says he would hold it back when he was medical examiner because he thought that there may have been some issues with neck fractures. The last thing that is significant is what we said before about him, the condition of his body when he went into the water. Was he conscious or unconscious? Was he forced or unforced into the water? He said those things are very significant. But he started off talking about this red discoloration in the back of his head is something that was of great concern to him. Thank you.
12 centimeters by 8. That's the size and area of red discoloration found on the back of an 18-year-old's head, found in the soft tissue of the occipital region, the lower part of the skull, by an independent medical examiner who says he cannot explain why it's there. And that's not even the strangest part. When that examiner received the body, something was missing, the throat, already removed, before he ever got the chance to look at it himself. This is the newest piece of a case that still doesn't have an ending. Before we go further, I need something from you. This isn't a story we're reporting after the fact, with all the answers already in. It's happening in real time, right now, to a family that buried their son 2 days before hearing this exact finding. If that matters to you, hit subscribe, tap the bell, and like this video before we continue. It genuinely helps put pressure where it belongs on getting this family real answers instead of more waiting. Let's set the scene properly, because the timing here matters. On Wednesday, at the NAACP National Convention in Chicago, attorney Ben Crump stood beside Nolan Wells' parents and announced preliminary findings of the independent autopsy they'd commissioned. The headline finding was simple and, honestly, unsatisfying. Cause and manner of death undetermined, pending further investigation.
Preliminary report, second autopsy, death of Nolan Xavier Wells. Cause of death undetermined, pending investigation.
Not homicide, not accident, undetermined. After 18 days of waiting, that's the word this family got. But undetermined doesn't mean nothing was found. Dr. Roger Mitchell, president of the National Medical Association, who conducted the independent exam, described that patch of red discoloration on the back of Nolan's head as something he could not explain and considered significant. Crump was careful, and we want to be equally careful relaying this to you. Significant decomposition had already occurred by the time the second autopsy took place, which means it was impossible to determine whether there was actual bruising underneath that discoloration. And there's an ordinary, non-sinister explanation on the table, too. Discoloration like this can sometimes occur simply from blood pooling while a body is positioned during examination, a normal process that happens after death regardless of how someone died. Even Crump did not call this proof of anything. He called it concern. Then there's the throat. Mitchell noted that by the time he examined Nolan's body, components of the throat were already gone, removed earlier by the official state medical examiner. Crump has publicly asked why. He says the reason an examiner might hold back that specific tissue is to check for neck fractures or compression, The kind of injury you'd look for if strangulation were a possibility. He's not accusing anyone of that. He's asking a direct, specific question that, as of right now, has not been answered. And underneath both of those findings is the same question this case has circled from the very beginning. Was Nolan conscious or unconscious when he entered the water? Was it force or was it not? 2 weeks ago, that question felt abstract. Today, for the first time, there's an actual physical detail attached to it. To understand why this finding lands the way it does, you have to go back 2 days earlier, to Monday, July 20th, and the moment this family said goodbye to their son, without any of this information in hand yet. Hundreds gathered at Center Point Church in Ocean Springs. Christine Wansley stood at the podium and thanked God for choosing her and her husband Elmore to be Nolan's parents. Thanked him for 18 years with a son who, in her words, had a way of making people feel seen, welcomed, and valued. Elmore, sitting beside her, described his son the way his teammates always had. Quiet, more action than words. A silent leader nobody needed to be told to follow. Reverend Al Sharpton officiated. Filmmaker Tyler Perry paid for the service, drawing on his own experience fighting for answers after a family member died in custody. And in his eulogy, Sharpton said something that, in hindsight, now reads less like grief and more like a direct challenge to investigators. He questioned why Nolan's friends left him behind, why they'd ended up with his phone and his keys, why nobody called the police themselves that night. He said local officials had spoken too soon when they suggested no crime was suspected, before any real investigation had actually run its course. At the time, those were pointed words from a eulogy. Now, when an unexplained mark on the back of Nolan's skull and a missing piece of his throat entered into the public record, they read differently. This is where confirmed details from the weeks before the funeral start to matter again, because none of them have gone away. Christine Wansley still says that when Nolan's phone was tracked and retrieved, messages had already been deleted before the family ever saw them. Elmore still describes a moment his trust broke completely, when a friend at whose house Nolan had stayed the night before first claimed not to know where his car keys were, only produced them minutes later after a phone call. And there's still an unresolved contradiction in the account of Nolan's very last conversation. His friends say he chose to stay behind on the island to spend time with a young woman he'd met that day. According to Crump, that same young woman told a different story, that Nolan said he was heading back to get on a boat with everyone else. None of these details, individually, prove anything happened beyond a tragic accident. But now they're not sitting alone anymore. They're sitting next to a forensic finding that, however preliminary, however explainable it might turn out to be, nobody has actually explained yet. Let's slow down and think through what we're actually looking at here, because this is where the psychology of the case matters just as much as the pathology. A patch of discoloration on the back of a skull can mean almost nothing. Livor mortis, the settling of blood after death depending on how a body is positioned, is a completely ordinary post-mortem process, and Mitchell himself acknowledged that possibility sits right alongside the more concerning one. Decomposition genuinely can erase the difference between an old bruise and simple gravity. That's not spin. That's how forensic pathology actually works, and it's worth resisting the urge around an unexplained finding up into a confirmed injury before anyone with the authority to make that call actually has. But here's the other side of that same coin, the side that's much harder to sit with if you're Nolan's parent. An unexplained mark is still unexplained. A missing piece of tissue that could answer a specific, serious question, whether there was ever pressure or fracture of the neck, is still missing from where the independent examiner needed it to be, and the state, which removed it in the first place, hasn't offered a public explanation for why yet. Standard procedure doesn't require a public explanation in real time. But for a family that's already lost trust over 5 minutes and a set of car keys, silence on the state's side doesn't read as procedure. It reads as another gap in a story that already has too many. This is exactly the trap that grief and uncertainty build together. When there's no confirmed answer, the mind doesn't sit empty. It fills the space with whatever it does have. And right now, what this family has is a list of small, real, documented gaps. A deleted message. A delayed set of keys. 2 people remembering the same final conversation 2 different ways. And now, a mark nobody can explain and tissue nobody handed over. None of these facts alone add up to proof. But you can understand completely why a mother and father who buried their son without an answer are no longer willing to accept undetermined and simply wait quietly for round two. And it's worth being honest about the other direction, too. Sharpton and Tyler Perry have each pledged $50,000 toward an arrest and conviction. That's a serious financial and public commitment. And it tells you plainly where their instinct is leaning. But a reward for information isn't a forensic conclusion. It's advocacy, born from watching this pattern before, in other cases, with other families who were told to wait and never got a real answer at all. So here's where this case actually stands, as of today, with nothing rounded up and nothing rounded down. Confirmed. An independent autopsy has found the cause and manner of Nolan Wells' death undetermined. Pending further investigation, a specific area of unexplained discoloration was found on the back of the skull. His throat tissue had already been removed by the state examiner before the independent exam took place, and Crump has publicly asked why. The state's own autopsy results still have not been released, and a reward, now backed by prominent public figures, is on the table for information leading to an arrest. Unconfirmed, and worth saying plainly so nobody walks away from this video thinking otherwise. Whether that discoloration reflects any actual injury or is simply the ordinary result of decomposition and body positioning. Whether the missing throat tissue reveals anything at all once it's actually examined. Whether Nolan entered the water conscious or unconscious, willingly or by force. Every one of those questions is open. None of them has an answer yet. So sit with this honestly, the same way this family has to. When forensic science hands you an unexplained detail instead of a clean answer, does that detail deserve real scrutiny, or does a human need for certainty risk turning an ordinary post-mortem process into something it was never proven to be? And when trust has already been broken by small things, deleted messages, a delayed set of keys, does a family have any obligation to wait patiently for round two, or has patience already cost them enough? We don't know what happened to Nolan Wells. Nobody watching this does either, not yet, not even with today's findings in hand. Tell us, honestly, what stands out mostly in the comments, respectfully, because a real family is living through every word of this conversation. And if you want to know the moment actual, confirmed answers arrive, not preliminary findings, not theories, but the full picture, subscribe to Mystora Crimes, because we'll be here the moment they do.